and welcome back to Sequels Suck. I am not your regular programmed host. I am stepping in because this film fascinates me to no end. I am, however, here with the regular host of the show, that is to say, Cable Sage.
Thank you.
Angus.
Heyo.
And what was your name again? Michelle.
Get off this podcast.
So, we have been talking about the Halloween franchise. It's probably taken a little bit longer than it perhaps should have, given that it's now broaching December, but we're slowly making our way through it. And I think we're probably having a lot of fun doing it. This week, talking about Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Now, should prefix this by saying, I find this film to be fascinating. And not the film itself, the production of the film. Because the production of this film is more interesting than the film itself. The film itself has a couple of things going for it, but nothing on the shitstorm that was the behind the scenes. So, this one released in September 1995 in America, 6 years after Halloween 5, which was the longest distance between two Halloween films that we had since the franchise started in 1978. And there's a couple of reasons for that. But before we get into that, when was the first time everybody watched it? Because I can imagine, Michelle, this would have been your first time, correct?
Mm-hmm. Today.
Sage, Gus, when was you?
I didn't wind up watching it till probably about, I want to say about 10, 11 years ago. I didn't watch it in high school like I did with the others because my local video store didn't have it. I knew it existed, but when I was watching Halloween movies, this was VHS era. This is not even Blu-ray, DVD, internet. This is back in the old days. So, and I grew up in a country town. Like we've talked about in other episodes, like if you wanted the movie and your local video store didn't have it, that movie might as well not exist. Like it just didn't, you just couldn't get it. So I was tangentially aware of the idea that there was this Halloween movie out, and I think I had seen some stills of it in maybe like a Fangoria magazine or an In Film or something like this, particularly because this one was released by Dimension, so it had a bit more kind of I guess cachet going around. I probably saw a lot of advertising for the VHS release of it coming off the back of Scream, which was 96, and that was Dimension. So I'm sure I saw it around. I definitely saw trailers for it. I think, in fact, maybe even the copy of Scream I had on VHS that I owned had, like, they used to put trailers at the start of your VHS. I think that might have had it, and I had watched that trailer a lot and had built a bit of an idea in my head of what this movie was going to be. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, that's the guy from Clueless is in it. All right, sick. Like, what's going on? I can't wait to see this. And then when I got older and moved and found a video store that had a wider range, I was like, oh my God, Halloween, yes, is that? And because you said we're talking about Halloween 6, we're not talking about Halloween 6, we're talking about Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. It's the first one that doesn't have a number. Yeah. So when I found it, I was like, wait, is this fucking Halloween 6? And I wasn't sure. And like, this is still, the internet was around when I finally found it, but it was still early days. You couldn't just whip out your phone and be like, what is Halloween 6 called? And Google would interpret that to mean like, you're asking what is The Curse of Michael Myers? So I grabbed it and I was like, I guess this is Halloween 6. I think this one was made before H2O. I'd already seen H2O by then, and I was like, all right, we'll give it a crack.
Oh, really? Was it that late down the line?
Oh, yeah, I'd seen H2O. I'd seen Resurrection. It was like the last one that I watched before the current incarnation of Rob Zombie ones and David Gordon Green ones. So this came like right at the end of my discovery of Halloween films, and was kind of made doubly confusing for me because I had always kind of presumed that H2O and Laurie's son must have connected somehow to Paul Rudd in Halloween 6 because I hadn't seen it. But I was like, Josh Hartnett, Paul Rudd, they kind of look the same. They probably got something to do with each other. So when I finally went back and watched it, I was like, this got fucking nothing to do with these guys. So it was really late in the game, and it never became like one of those regular Friday night watches because by this stage when I watched, like I was out of uni, like I was bordering on adulthood. Right. So all the others I would rent on a fortnightly basis. I'd just watch a Halloween movie at home because I was like, I'll just watch 4 again or whatever. This one never got that rewatchability. So I've probably only seen it maybe 4 or 5 times in my entire life.
Well, that's still 3 or 4 times more than Michelle. So
But yeah, this is
I
the
mean-
one that has, and this is probably the one that I've watched maybe Resurrection. I think Resurrection is the one I watched the least, but this is like a close second on the, H2O. I bought the day that it got released on VHS, and I watched the shit out of that movie. So this one has the least amount of like emotional connection for me or nostalgia.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested to see where you and Cable in particular sit on it, because I
Mm.
feel like it's going to be a different story. When did you watch it, Cable?
Yeah, I would have been probably the same era. I wouldn't have seen it straight away on VHS. And the same thing is weird because we're so used to it now. But like you said, it was called Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. So it was kind of that weird, like, it wasn't called 6, which is back then it was either it was a 6 or it was the numerals V1. And it's like that wasn't even that. But I think similar to you, I would have seen the trailer on a horror video at the start, whether that was, I don't think it would have been Scream necessarily, but would have seen it in that time frame. But I know I did make sure I saw it before I saw H2O. But again, it's one of those ones. I wouldn't say it's the least one I've watched, but it's probably up there. It's probably there with Resurrection, that one that I haven't really put on as much. Even though the amazingly talented Paul Stephen P.H. Rudd is in it.
Yeah, I think we might have got his name wrong in a previous episode. I realized when the credits came, I was like, I think we might have called him something other than Paul Stephen Rudd. So for anyone who's listening,
which is funny
"You
because he calls the
fuckheads."
baby Stephen as well. So
Yeah,
That's right. He does as well.
he gives.
I was
That's
the
why
same.
he's just billed as Paul Rudd from now on, because he gives the baby the Stephen, and he could never use it again.
Oh yeah, true.
Makes sense. Yeah, I was the same. My because I was lucky that I was the exact opposite as you guys. Is that I was in the middle of about 4 different video stores, and all I had to do was get on my bike, and I could ride to any one of them.
We
Sounds
remember.
like
Oh yeah, right. But it was one of those weird. I feel like the mid '90s when Halloween came out, and there was that sort of push of more modern horror films. Horror films, particularly, sort of caught the raw end of the deal a little bit because so many of them bypassed the cinemas and just went straight to video, as it was in those days. And Halloween, despite how poorly it went in America, and we'll get to that later, but it's one of those ones that was probably always going to be destined to go straight to video. But I had to make the trek. I had to ride out to video stores. Do you guys have Halloween Curse of Michael Myers? And when I found a video store that did, it was like, elation. And I hired it, took it home, and I watched it.
I was going to say, please tell me that you get to the front desk and they go, "Do you have any ID? Are you old enough to hire this?" No, sorry, mate, you can't.
Nah, definitely not. Because by the time it came out, like I was after. It was beyond the age limit anyway. So because I'm 40 in a couple months, I don't know if you can tell my youth, but
yeah, we're waiting for the invites that have clearly got lost in the mail. But anyway,
well, to be fair, there's no party started. There's no party yet. Molly goes like, she goes, "Oh, it's your 40. What do you want to do?" I'm like, maybe you and me just go out to dinner and go see a movie. And she just looked at me and she's like, "Crawford, it's your fucking 40. We're not going to dinner and a movie." So I assume she's looking after it. I don't know. I don't know
like the greatest 40th ever.
Right? I'm just like, just me and you, babe. We'll go out.
Go eating
fine.
way
Don't
too much
worry about it.
Mexican, and then go to a movie, and then go home and lay on the couch and watch another movie.
Fucking great. Like, perfect, right?
Brilliant.
So anyway, Halloween 6, straight to VHS in Australia. It was the second one to go straight to VHS after Halloween 5. And like we said, it just kind of got lost a little bit. So a weirdly niche release. Nobody really had it. You had to make an effort to go see it. But before you even watched it, I feel like Halloween 6 had its work kind of cut out for it a little bit, because it had to accomplish 2 or 3 things simultaneously. One, it had to drag Halloween from the 80s into the 90s. And we're talking about the peak independent height of cool in the 90s, like 1994, 1995, 1996. Pulp Fiction, Get Shorty, like Wes Anderson, like so these are the films that have to compete. So that's the first thing it has to do. The last Halloween was in 1989. So it had to drag its ass into the 90s. The second thing it had to do was it had to try and tackle all of the nonsense that Halloween 5 set up. It has to tackle the cult stuff, the cult of Thorn. It has to tackle the Man in Black. It has to tackle all these questions and do it in a modern way that would satisfy audiences that were about to step into the world of like Scream and post Scream. Like it has to keep up because those were the big game changers, and they all came out at the same time when Dimension sort of started becoming a bit of a powerhouse. But loosely, the story for those that may or may why you'd be listening to this, you haven't watched it, I have no idea. But the story loosely is that 6 years after Michael's last terrorized Haddonfield, they've kind of started moving on with their life. But Jamie Lloyd, who was at the end of part 5, left in the police station, remember? And she's like kind of freaking out because he's been broken up. She, for some reason, has now been captured by the Cult of Thorn, and she's on her way to delivering her baby. Spoiler note: she's 15 at this time. She's 15. That's where the timeline lands.
In this movie.
Well, yeah, because this movie's 6 years after Halloween 5, and in Halloween 5, she's 8. So we're giving her the benefit of the doubt she's 15. She might even be 14.
I mean, she looks like she's 23.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, I guess that was the thing when the last time I rewatched it too, it was kind of like, oh, there's got science, so they're acknowledging this is 1995, so it's not any farther in the future. But then I was kind of trying to work out the timeline. I'm like, well, Jamie's still pretty young. Yeah, I guess she could fall pregnant young, but she doesn't look. She's not old, but not super young.
No.
So I was kind of like, this is weird because it feels like it's that
wrong.
awkward. Like, well, she's clearly underage having a baby. If you follow the timeline somewhat exactly, or she's, I don't know. It's a bit confusing.
Also important to note
confusing.
that Daniel Harris is out and JC Brandy is in, so we have a different actor playing.
We have a different
Jamie,
Brandy,
just to make it even harder to figure out who she's in it.
I know. And do you know the story as to why Daniel Harris wasn't in it?
$5,000. That's the story that I heard. They wouldn't give her the extra $5,000.
$5,000.
So they recast it.
When Daniel Harris heard that they were putting out a casting call for the new Jamie Lloyd, then she, probably rightly so, wanted a piece of it because she'd played Jamie Lloyd twice before. But the production company wanted somebody who was overage so they didn't have to deal with child labor laws. They wanted to be over 18. Daniel Harris at the time was 17, so she couldn't do it. But what she ended up doing was she went to court with her parents' blessing, went to court and became emancipated from her parents, which cost her $4,000. She went back to the producers and said, I want to take the part. I will do it for $5,000 because my court costs were $4,000 if you give me the part. And they still said no. So they wouldn't even pay her $5,000 to step on, and which at the time was like base salary. Like even the wages of the guys and girls in Scream. I remember hearing an interview with Matthew Lillard when he did Scream 1. He's like, my entire salary for Scream was like $4,000. Like it was nothing. Yeah, because that was at the time in 1995. He was on Jay Moore's podcast, More Stories, and that's what he was like. He's like, the first time I ever got paid proper adult money was Scooby Doo. He says up until then, he says like it was like thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. Yeah, and in Scream, Matthew, it was SAG minimum. Yeah,
tight with the purse string. They never wanted to pay anyone. So the Weinsteins constantly were in arguments with people over contracts and constantly screwing people out of money and making deals like, oh, we'll give you a percentage off the back end. And then suddenly that never happens, or films, according to the books, never made money. So they didn't have to actually pay them, even though these movies were making $100 million at the box office opening weekend. Yeah. So
they're just awful. So so that's why Daniel Harris didn't come back. She volunteered. She put her name up for it, but she just
that's a dumb decision if that was the case. Like that's
100%.
Doesn't that just lend itself to people wanting to go see this movie because she's in it again? Like, even if she's killed off in the first scene, you don't have to know that. It's just
totally agree. It was a weird decision.
It's not like she's asking for $1 million and 5% of the profits. Like, come on.
No. And the budget of the film, the budget of this was close to the budget of Halloween 5. It was about $5 million, which is pretty modest, all things considered. You probably don't need much more. But so Jamie's pregnant. She gives birth to a new boy, which is a new Strode family member. But she doesn't want Michael to find her, so she takes the baby and she runs away, only for Michael to pursue her down. She hides the baby. Michael, spoiler, Michael shows up, kills her, and then her baby gets found by your man,
Tommy.
Ant-Man,
Tommy D.
by Tommy, who, as we know, is a character from the first one. He's all grown up, and now he's like this paranoid, almost paranoid
Conspiracy
Michael
theory.
Myers, obsessive conspiracy theorist. And then he bumps it into Loomis. Loomis is back on the scene, and then together they end up
Again,
discovering
magically showing up,
cult.
just
of course.
like a
Yeah,
wizard.
I know. It's just so happens to be listening to the exact radio station on the exact night where Daniel Harris, where Jamie Lloyd calls up. Like, just what a quinky dink. That's lucky. Anyway, cut a long story short, between the two of them, they try, and then the new character who's a little dull, Kara, the name was, wasn't it? Yeah, Kara. They try and work out Michael's involvement with the Cult of Thorn, and then work out who the Man in Black is and what the tattoo means, and his Michael's abilities, and it just divulges into absolute insanity by the end of it. Like, and it's a weird film because it kind of starts to rely on magic and mysticism a great deal, and I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest. What about you guys? Where does it lie? Like once you start dragging in all the cults and the sacred rituals and all that kind of nonsense, like, I don't know. It feels like they're jumping the shark.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
I think it's very similar to 5 in that it's got some ideas, but they've tried to either cram too many of the ideas and not form them properly into the movie, or they haven't really, like, even with the kid Danny, like, so what's his deal? And is he got some sort of linkage to Michael and the cult, and I think there's a lot of that stuff that's left ambiguous, or it's supposed to make us almost have almost like a red herring, like, oh, well, is this kid going to be involved? And it's like they needed to pick a lane and sort of stay in it a little bit, I think. But similar to what we probably, spoke about off air, I think this is a movie that it comes up with some good ideas, but again, with all the source material we've known before it, you're kind of undermining. If you're saying now Michael was just part of a cult, or he was, a chosen one to be the person to wipe out his family to save the whole tribe, that's fine. But then it's kind of like, well, that kind of undermines everything else we've sort of seen. Like, I don't know, but I'm just trying to think. So Halloween 2 does mention kind of, there is that conversation similarly around Sam Hain and a few other things when they're in the school and Dr. Loomis is talking about it. And I feel like they do kind of sprinkle that in, like it's kind of mentioned, but not really, doesn't flow through necessarily. But it's, yeah, I don't hate the idea. I just think it's weird. It's a bit like a movie that me and Angus have talked about before on the podcast, The Mummy Returns, where conveniently there's a tattoo that one of the characters didn't have in the first movie that he's just noticed, and it's like, oh, well, this means you're actually a Magi. It's like, oh, you're one of us.
Noticed.
We didn't notice it the first time around when we had the problem, but now conveniently we remember. But also, your wife is reincarnated of, it just all works, and it's like,
and also there's a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy who's just fucking getting in the way the whole movie. Who you wish wasn't there, because what the hell do you do with him when he's on screen?
Very similar to this too.
Yeah, I think. Look, I am in a similar mindset. I think. Honestly, I'm really excited for this conversation of this movie, because I still don't know where I land, how I feel about this movie, because there's so much going on, and there is some merit to some stuff, and also other stuff can get fucked. We're at number 6 in the franchise, and I think at this point you've reached kind of a crossroad, and you either got to double down on he's just a man, and for some reason you can't kill him, but we're never going to explain it. Like, you can shoot him, stab him, blow him up, drive him off a cliff. It doesn't matter. He won't die. That's just his thing, and we're not going to explain it. He's just going to come back and kill you. Or you've reached a point after 6 movies or 5 movies where you're like, we got to say something. Like, it's getting awkward. We've got to explain how this fucking guy how does he keep fucking coming back? What's happening?
Getting awkward.
Yeah, like it's become the elephant in the room. It's like, is anyone going to reference the fact this fucking human being won't die? And so I think finally they're like, okay, well, 5 really fucked us bad. And this is also, I think, something a lot of like modern moviegoers are gonna, especially as time goes on, they're gonna forget. But like, there was a time in cinema where you couldn't go back and erase what came before. Like, you got what you got and you dealt with it.
Yeah.
Franchises couldn't reset. They couldn't ignore films. They couldn't even. There was no reboot or soft reboot or like. You either made the movie.
You couldn't Kathleen Kennedy it.
Yeah, you made it or you didn't.
That's what
like,
I'm going to call it from now on.
Yeah, you got a sequel.
Just going to
or
Kathleen Kennedy
you went, hey, we fucked ourselves so hard, we can't make any more of these movies. So that's just kind of it. Like, we accidentally backed ourselves into a corner in part 15, and that's why there's not a part 16. So part 6 really does have to address part 5. It can't, like, it can ignore the bits that it wants to, which is what part 5.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, part 5 ignores what it wants to of part 4, like we talked about in the previous episode, where Jamie is evil and murders her mom, and then in part 5 is like, she's not really evil, she's more kind of mute, all right, and then we're going to keep going, and that's what you get. And this one, they're like, we want to make another Michael Myers movie, but in the last movie he has this weird fucking tattoo, there's this guy in a black trench coat, there's this references that are kind of sporadically thrown in about like druids and rituals that like, do we ignore that and risk the audiences being like, we waited 6 years for you to explain like who the fucking guy was who broke him out of jail, and you just ignored it, or they have to give what they think is a good explanation. So I don't think I'm like mad or upset about the fact that they're like, let's go druids like that. They kind of loosely hung around that idea in part 3, so it's not a totally foreign concept in this world. It's also like Freddy does dreams, Jason does like zombie-ish kind of thing, Leprechaun does like magical mysticism, Child's Play does voodoo. Like, what have we got left, really? What can we do that's our thing, that's magic? And it's not something people knew a lot about in the mid-90s, was like druid cult rituals. So I was like, all right, cool, that sounds scary and it sounds magical, but we don't have to do too much. Like, you can't make him a vampire because people are like, well, actually, we know a lot about vampires, like, or zombies. Like, you got to pick something that's a bit, you got to pick something that's a bit left of center so that the audience isn't one step ahead of you. And I think they did the best they could with what they had.
I agree, but it's also, and I never really considered it until I was sitting thinking about Halloween 6, is the 90s had this weird trend in horror where the next installment, for some fucking reason, had to pick up exactly where the one before it finished.
Yes.
And I think that kind of
started by Halloween 2.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think it's
all Halloween's fault to begin with.
Exactly right. It's a weird hole to because I think a lot of the troubles in Halloween 6 could have probably been resolved if they didn't feel shoehorned into dealing with that same format. It's weird. But the reason that it feels like it's kind of in one way and out the other when it comes to story and where it was going is because it was one of those horrendously troubled productions. Because when Halloween 5 bombed at the box office, Mustafa Akkad, who was the producer of those ones, he decided that rather than try and get another one out in a year or so, we're going to take a step back and we're going to think about it and we're going to make it as good as we can possibly get it. In that time, however, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, who hadn't had anything to do with the franchise for about 20 years or so, they decided that they were going to try and sue Mustafa Akkad in order to get the rights for the franchise back, which was relatively interesting until you hear what Carpenter had planned. Carpenter's plan, not a word of a lie, was, and I paraphrase, his plan was, well, we've seen him shot, we've seen him blown up, we've seen him drowned, we've seen him like all those things. What else can we do with him? We're going to put him in space, but we're going to have him break out of space. Hand on my heart, that was John Carpenter's idea. He was going to put Michael Myers into space before Jason went, before Hellraiser went, before, like, it was, which in hindsight, probably a good thing that it ended up not going through. But
no slasher has survived space so far. Any slasher franchise that's gone to space mid franchise, Leprechaun's done it, Hellraiser's done it, and Friday the 13th's done it.
Friday the
And
13th, didn't it?
Nobody
Even James
Friday the
Bond did
13th
it.
was all right. Even James Bond did it as well. Moonraker. Space is where characters go to die. And
yeah,
I
if
just
you
can't
don't
imagine
start
that it
in
would be-
space and they send you there, it's over. Like
Mm,
Aliens
yeah,
works
exactly.
because they started there. It's fine.
Yeah.
But if you're like, hey,
Once
I'm from
aliens
Earth
comes to
and
Earth,
it's over.
I'm
That's
fucked.
it. You can't. You got to stick with what you got.
So Carpenter, while he was trying to sue Mustafa Akkad, the reason he was trying to sue them was because he was trying to get the rights back so that then he could give it to New Line Cinema. Because at the time, he was doing In the Mouth of Madness for New Line Cinema, and he quite liked them. But New Line Cinema also, for those who may or may not know, Michelle, New Line Cinema, they call the house that Freddie built, because that was the film that gave New Line Cinema the clout that it had.
I did
So
know
New
that.
Line Cinema already. So New Line Cinema already had Freddy. It had just acquired. It had just acquired Jason with Jason Goes to Hell, and now John Carpenter was trying to take the rights for franchising Halloween and then give that to them as well. Interesting, because that would have probably ended up delivering us Freddy versus Jason long before we got it, because it was all the characters were all messed up in all kinds of legal battles. Needless to say, as we know now, Carpenter didn't win. Mustafa Akkad and Mustafa Akkad retained the rights for Halloween, but then in another separate bidding war, the Weinsteins stepped in and they got the rights for distribution for the new Halloween. That's how they ended up coming in. So then, yeah, that's basically why the big boys, the Weinsteins, when I say big, I mean fat, why the big fat boys ended up tied into it. Which probably wasn't that necessarily a bad thing at the time, because because Miramax and the subsidiary Dimension, they were banging out like a lot of stuff. They were they just dealt with Quentin Tarantino on Pulp Fiction. They were dealing with Good Will Hunting. They just acquired the rights to the Hellraiser. In fact, Hellraiser Bloodline.
Bloodline is coming. But their first thing that they released was Hell on Earth. So Hellraiser 3 was the first.
Back in 1993. Exactly.
Yeah, so they got that, and then they did a Godzilla movie. Then they did Children of the Corn 2. Like they were
2,
yeah, they were giving people kind of what they wanted. The Crow, they did The Crow, obviously. Highlander 3, they picked up that. They did The Prophecy. They were doing Children of the Corn 3. So they were in it. They were in the shit
100%.
with this, like giving people that sweet, usually direct to VHS horror movie fix. So
more often than not.
I mean, again, like it's really easy to look back now and be like, why the fuck would you work with the Weinsteins? But in 1995, Dimension would have been like the best thing ever for the Halloween franchise. Like it's been
they were
6
the
years
best thing
since
ever
anyone...
for so many franchises. They were amazing. And let's not forget, Miramax had just come off of Oscar glory with Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Which is then the two things I want to remember to talk about is Quentin Tarantino's involvement in Halloween 6, and then Hellraiser Bloodline's involvement in Hellraiser in Halloween 6.
Well,
so Miramax,
God damn.
There's
a lot more. Yeah, there's a lot more to the story than I knew. Like I did a bunch of research on 5 and 6, and I didn't get anywhere close to finding Tarantino and Hellraiser being involved.
Mate, I am like, I'm being kind to you. Like, I've spent the last week or so just like, I'm taking down notes because I'm just like, I got to remember all this shit, because like
God.
So at this time, 1994, Quentin Tarantino has just come off of Pulp Fiction, Oscar glory, The Coolest Kid in the Block. He's also not long had a couple of his films on the market that have been sold for great returns, namely Pulp Fiction and Natural Born Killers. So Quentin Tarantino, as a script doctor, he also did rewrites on Crimson Tide.
That one I did know.
Yeah. So as a script doctor and a script writer and producer director Gold, Miramax went to Quentin Tarantino and said, what would you do with Halloween? So he ends up spinning off this big, huge story, this 20-minute sequence of Michael in the car with the man in black and blah, 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 blah. But eventually he says, I'm not the guy to direct it. Maybe you should go to one of our friends, Scott Spiegel. Does anybody know who Scott Spiegel is? Scott Spiegel was, for the uninitiated, one of Sam Raimi's friends, and he co-wrote The Evil Dead 2 with Sam Raimi, which was this revelation. It was this perfect horror comedy film, massive cult favorite, huge film. Spiegel also directed his first film in 1989, 1990, called The Intruder. It was a little self-contained horror film set in a supermarket over the course of one night with an alien intruder.
Fucking great. It's so good.
Cookie little film, right? And it's quite good. But what this did was this introduction ended up bringing Scott Spiegel into the Miramax Dimension camp. He did a pass on the treatment, and he wrote something like an 8-page treatment for Halloween 6, but it didn't actually end up going to him for the gig. He did end up, however, staying with Miramax and Dimension Films and ended up directing From Dusk Till Dawn 2 for them, Texas Blood Money, which wasn't particularly good, but his foot was now in the door and he was off on his own trajectory. So he only wrote a treatment for it, but by the time the original script, which was written by another guy, I forget his name now. The original guy had handed in his original script, and it leaned really heavily into the cult stuff. Have you got it there, Angus?
Yeah, I'm looking. So this is where I found myself. Is this Daniel Farrens or Dennis Etchison? Who are you talking about here? So there's Farrens.
Dennis, because Darren doesn't come in till later on.
Yeah, so Dennis Etchison.
So the original script, yeah.
He wrote a novelization of other movies.
From Halloween 1.
Yeah, and so he was kind of in it, and he had come up with like essentially a Bible for like what this movie could be. Like he'd written out like, here's all these characters, here's where they're going, he says what it should be, and he like really had this huge expansive idea of what Halloween could be moving forward, and brought it in and was like, hey guys, check out all this crazy stuff. And there was a lot of the cult stuff, there was a lot of like mysticism and things that could come in, and I think that's where
Scott
Miramax
Rosenberg
was like, what the fuck is going on? And things pumped the brakes. So it's
just about, because it was all happening.
Are we 4 script writers in at this point, I think?
Well, with Scott Rosenberg, who delivered the original script, which was, like I said, leaning really heavily into the cult stuff. Then Scott Spiegel did a pass, but not in the script, only in the treatment, because Miramax didn't quite like Scott Rosenberg's original script. He didn't end up getting it. The first rewrite came with a writing duo called Irvin Bilitesh and Lawrence Gutterman. They wrote a pass rewriting Scott Rosenberg's original script, but including some from the novelization from the 1978 original film and some elements that Scott Spiegel wrote in his 4-page treatment. So now we're starting to see why the final product of Halloween 6, the story, was such a mess, because now you've got all these fingers and pies, everybody wants a piece of it, but nobody knows where to take it and where to go. The draft that pair, Butterworth and Bilitesh, ended up handing in focused mostly on Tommy, and he had him as like this, because it was mid-90s, this virtual reality guru, this internet virtual reality guru, and he worked out how he could trap Michael Myers into a vortex and take him to hell, which sounds a little bit too much like the end of good. So, it sounds a little bit too much like the end of Jason Goes to Hell, but they ended up not liking that script. Then they went to this guy, Daniel Farris.
Yeah, Farrens with an S.
Feel free. I'm perfectly aware that I'm talking an awful lot here. Fucking step in at any stage if you get bored.
Well, the only thing I want to throw in here, because I've just been keeping up with what you're talking as we go through. You talked about Tarantino's past. You didn't talk about his actual pitch, and the pitch that I can find is it was Michael Myers and the Man in Black going on a road trip down Route 66 and just killing a bunch of people along the way. So
Killing everybody.
yeah, but like it's a Michael Myers road trip, which like he loves being in a
I'd watch it.
car. So that like after 5, like makes the most sense to put him in a car, and him and just this guy in a black overcoat just driving through towns. Like it kind of sounds a bit from Dusk Till Dawn-ish, like first 2 acts of Dusk Till Dawn, where it's just like let's just get these badass dudes in a car going around killing people. Like that's a cool pitch,
100%.
and
I'd watch it. That's a cool pitch, man.
It's not a Halloween film we've seen, so I'd be down with that. And I can imagine Tarantino doing a pass, and because Michael doesn't talk, like making the Man in Black kind of essentially like a Tarantino version of Jay in Jay and Silent Bob, and you've essentially got like the murdered version of Jay and Silent Bob. And this guy's just like Man in Black is just monologuing about all this crazy shit as they drive, and then like halfway through a monologue, be like, "There's one," and he pulls over, and Michael just gets out and fucking stabs this guy and gets back, and he's like, "So anyway, what I was saying
Blah,
is."
blah, blah.
They don't have a quarter pounder over there. They got no idea what it is. They have the metric system, and he just keeps driving. And Michael's just like wiping the blood on his shirt.
I would watch it.
Yeah,
It's even got shadows of Grindhouse, obviously, of Death
Yeah.
Proof. It kind of feels a little bit Death Proof-ish, and I'm wondering
what it
that's where
feels-
the origins of Death Proof actually came from.
it also feels a fuck ton like Natural Born Killers. Just 2 people cruising around
Yeah.
America.
Yeah, no, that's true.
On highways, just murdering people.
Slaying people.
Yeah. Apparently, Roger Avery
your man
is another person
then-
who pitched a script as well. I don't know how much
Well,
merit
yeah,
that
well,
is. Maybe.
because he was back with the Quentin, because this was before Roger Avery and Quentin Tarantino fell out. They were still hot off the back of
Pulp Fiction.
They were still hot off the back of Pulp Fiction, and I believe, excuse me, Avery was in pre-production for his directing debut, Killing Zoe. I think. But anyway, this kid Daniel Farand, he ends up in the scene because he met Mustafa Akkad like 4 years before, and Mustafa Akkad was quite impressed with him because Farand was like a self-professed Halloween super fan. So he pitched to Akkad the stuff that he was going to do in the script, and he was hired to do another pass of the script, basically from scratch. But at this stage, we're now 4 months off pre-production. We're 4 months off, like walking up set kind of thing. So the new script by him kept the idea of Tommy Doyle, kept the new character of Dana, and got rid of the virtual reality and the Myers curse bloodline and all that kind of nonsense was already in that script. And he's written this new script where Michael's hearing voices to kill his family from the past because of an ancient curse he's afflicted. And then he was the guy that actually came up with the idea that the Sam Hain, the tattoo, matches the constellations, and the massacres coincide with the constellations through the cosmos, and blah 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 blah, and all became like just this big convoluted fucking mess at this stage. But then they hadn't got a director yet. All this time, we're now like 3.5 months out, and they need to try and get themselves a director. So they're already in pre-production, but nobody's guiding the ship necessarily. So they end up going to this guy, Matthew Patrick, who directed a little independent horror film called Hider in a House. And he was going to be the guy. And he got on his mate, Billy Dixon, who was a cinematographer, because they were pals. Fine, good, great. Now this ship has a rudder and we know where we're going to go. The problem is that Patrick ended up losing the gig, but Dixon stayed on board to shoot it. Then Patrick was replaced by, remember that the original When a Stranger Calls?
Oh yeah, with I can't remember her
the
name,
late
but like
70s.
the comedic actress who has the funny voice
Yeah.
playing a serious part in a horror role. Oh,
Correct.
what the hell is her name? She's brilliant. But
So
Such a good
the
movie.
director of that, Fred Walt, it's such a good movie. The sequel sucked, but like the original was so good. The director of that,
hey,
Fred
huzzah,
Walton,
he said it.
what?
He said the
The
name of the
sequel
show in the
Fred
show.
Walton?
Sequels suck.
No, sequels suck.
Oh yeah, of course, the sequel sucked. Good.
Carol Kane.
But
Carol
the
Kane,
director
that's
of
who it
that,
was.
Fred Walton, Carol Kane, that's it. So Walton was brought in now, because he was thought to be this reliable horror guy with a proven track record. Billy Dixon's still on cinematography duties, and Matthew Ferran has produced the script. Cool, everything seems like it's gone ahead. Then Fred Walton drops out, so now we're back to square one. One of the producers of Halloween 6, though, had seen this little independent crime movie called Thieves Quartet that just about nobody's seen. I've seen some random obscure shit, and I've never get my hands on Thieves Quartet, but it was the directorial debut of Joe Chappelle. Based on the back of that, Joe Chappelle got signed up to direct Halloween and maintained Dixon as the cinematographer, and production starts. So far, so good. Does anybody need me to take a break before I go on any further?
I mean, this is a great indication of where we're about to go. But I think it's also a really important thing to cover because of where we are. And I think we talked about so many times, what the fuck is happening? And so many times, as you said in the last episode, Shaun, who knows? So much of what went into 5 happened on the fly and was just made up as we went along. It's great that this much, I'm going to call it effort. It also sounds like there's a lot of mistakes being made, but mistakes being made when they should be made, which is in the development phase of a film. You want all of this shit to go wrong or to people to be replaced now. You don't want this happening once
100%
starting to roll. So that's all really really cool. It's wild to think that this was the first time, though, that I think we've discussed has gone on. This is the first time that Halloween feels like a hot property for Hollywood. Famously, the first one was an independent movie, basically.
Right.
It was an independent film. The sequel was it was all in house. Carpenter and Hill and Akkad, they're we're making another one. And then the third one was okay, well, Akkad wants another one, and then Hill's going to kind of produce, and we're still going to have Carpenter and Howarth doing the score, and then we'll just get Carpenter's mate to direct it. That's fine. And then the fourth one, it was it still kind of felt like in house, and the fifth one was I feel like only Mustafa Akkad wanted that movie to happen. But this one, it seems like the entire Hollywood is we want to make a fucking, everyone wants a piece of the pie. So I guess looking at the films now, is this the first time that the Halloween films really started to be appreciated as the mammoth franchise that it's now regarded as? Up until this point, I mean, I wasn't really paying attention, but it feels it sounds like Halloween was just kind of schlocky horror thing that by 5 people are oh, it's done, forget about it, we don't even care. 4 made a lot of money, and then by 5
we're relegated to the DVD, straight to DVD kind of market.
So that's history will show that was the end of that and we're done now. But by 6, somehow 6 years off made everyone go, let's be a part of this. This is gonna be huge. Like you said, Tarantino was as hot as it gets, 1992, 94 kind of period.
100%.
And all these other directors and these writers you're talking about, these are people who had prospects on the horizon. Maybe their careers didn't go Tarantino level, but they're all people who had shit going on. Even Daniel Harris kind of was I want to be a part of this. I will do it for fuck all money. I want to
be back in this. Yeah.
Everyone seemed to want to be a part of this, which it's only dawned on me as you said it, but this is not the case with any of the other Halloweens. The 2 and 3 and 4 almost kind of happened by accident. It's kind of someone was you want to make a Halloween movie? And people are oh yeah, we'll make a Halloween movie. All right. What do you need a mate to come and help out? Yeah, I'll come and help out. All right. No one was taking them seriously as actual franchise thing. Michael
hey,
Myers
Mom, we're going to make a Halloween film.
Yeah. Can you help me out? Does any of this, I'm very curious, Michelle, does any of this impact in any way your care factor of Halloween 6 at all? As someone who's so new to this, does it change your view of the film? You said you watched it a few hours ago, so it's still quite fresh in your mind. Does knowing all of what the fuck went into making this, does that impact at all how you think about the film now?
No, I'm still stuck on they made a sequel to From Dusk Till Dawn.
There's
made 2 sequels
and a TV series.
Oh.
And a TV show.
The third one is a prequel, though. It goes back in time, and Robert Patrick's in it. Or is he in the sequel? I think he's in the third one.
No, Robert Patrick's in the second one.
Yeah.
Or is
He's only in Texas
Mario
Blood
Van
Money.
Peebles in the third one?
Yeah,
Temuera Morrison is in the third one.
Isn't Mario Van Peebles in one of them?
No, you made me watch the first one. Then that was it.
Made you?
Yeah, because the other two were straight to video. At least here they were.
Yeah, they were everywhere, I think. But yeah, there's a whole TV series.
And even actually getting the sequels was pretty hard. I remember when they started coming out on DVD, you could get from Dusk Till Dawn like the trilogy sort of box set, but it was really sparingly available. It was just everyone just wanted the Miramax version of the first movie, and that was it.
Mario Van Peebles was in Highlander 3.
100%.
I'm getting my part 3s confused. There you go. That came out around the same time. Anyway, that has nothing to do with this movie.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I wonder if, what you're just talking about with all these movies, like, I mean, this Halloween becoming this juggernaut of, actually, no, this is a property we can use. I wonder if that just comes off the back of, for a while there, like towards the end of the 80s, it did feel like horror was kind of on the downward spiral. It was cliche. It was just like, eh. And then all of a sudden you get Candyman in 92 and a couple other decent films. And then it's like, hang on, we've got this IP. If we can get it right, there's a core fan base already there. A bit like, bringing Star Wars back or any of these other big franchises. Like, well, Halloween was big. If we can get it right, we can do Michael really well. It's just, again, obviously.
And is this the first time with these like long running franchises that happened? Because I mean, Wes Craven had his hands firmly on Nightmare on Elm Street the whole way through, and then when it was time for that to be reborn, he was the one who was like, "I got a great idea to bring Freddy back. Now that we've killed him off, I'm gonna like make the first meta film." And like the people who made the Friday the 13th movies were always like the same kind of people, that just kept going and going and going all the way through until 8, and then it wasn't that big of a break until they did Jason Goes to Hell, and they're like, we know what we're going to do with this. But the sort of the people who were creatively invested in making the Halloween movies, like Carpenter was out so early into this, and Akkad was really just, he wanted the money. Like he says he loves Michael Myers, but he loves him because he made money. So is this the first time that like you reached a point in a franchise where you're like, we need to bring it back from the dead, essentially, without restarting? Then none of the other big ones do that, do they?
Yeah.
Like even Hellraiser just kept friggin' going. It just kept going, and Leprechaun just kept going, and Child's Play.
It kept slogging away.
Like
Chucky was the same. Chucky was the exact same. And
like the closest I can think about with Chucky is they kept going. They just kind of changed tone, but they didn't stop. They're like, okay, we're going to lean into him being a bit of a wise ass and make it a bit funnier with Bride of Chucky. But they still just like, and it's still his name's gone right out of my head. But the creator of Child's Play, he's still there doing it. Don Mancini.
I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe you've touched on something. They try to kill off. I still remember as a kid, I was probably 13-ish when the big deal was Freddy's dead, the final nightmare, and that was like a big deal. Like, go see the final Freddy. And then a year later, Wes Craven's doing a new Nightmare, and that's like 94. So they're probably thinking, shit, we can do something with Michael. We can just not quite retcon it, but we can kind of just hopefully people will half forget because the last movie was 89. We can kind of just move forward, continue the story, and we'll just go the way that we want to go and start it like almost like you said early in the podcast, it's like almost like a soft reboot to a point, like I don't know.
Well, but that's the thing that baffles me the most about this one is like we had 6 years. Like you said, we've changed eras. It's not an 80s horror movie anymore. This is a mid-90s horror movie. And you said they had to drag it kicking and screaming and Shaun, and you're right. They don't really ignore the other one that like they're really beholden to it. We still have Jamie and we still have the Man in Black, and the whole story is essentially like it's Jamie and the Man in Black is what kicks it off, and then she gets killed really quickly, but it's her kid now, and it's Tommy Doyle from the first one. Like if you were a casual moviegoer who was like, what's coming out? Like, Halloween Curse of Michael Myers. Oh, the guy in the mask with the knife. Yeah, I just want to see a horror movie, whatever. There's a lot of like mythology and lore from the previous films you have to know about to even have a cursory understanding of this film. Like you don't get told who Jamie is. There's no like, oh, she was a little girl. Like there's nothing that tells you who she just starts and she's like having a baby in a cave. And then with Paul Rudd, you get like the briefest moment when Tommy runs into Dr. Loomis, and he's like, Tommy Doyle, she babysat me that night. But if you haven't seen Halloween, you have no fucking idea what they're talking about. And you also have no fucking idea who Loomis is, by the way. Like, he just shows up. He has absolutely no introduction. So there's 6 years past the last time I saw it. And they've restarted this engine, but they haven't rebooted it. They haven't ignored anything. They've layered a whole bunch of shit on top, but they haven't gone the way of being like,
they've just given it
let's
more.
just forget about all the others, which you kind of feel like they must have been thinking about doing, because they got rid of the numbers. Like, this isn't Halloween 6. This is The Curse of Michael Myers. This is not the next one. This is the new one. But they then like, oh yeah, but you have to see all the others. Any other time a movie loses the numbers, it's like, like the Mission Impossible. They get to Mission Impossible 3 and they're like, the next one is just no more numbers. But you don't have to see any of the Mission Impossible movies. You can just dive in. So that's kind of like the cue to the audience. It's like, we've dropped the numbers. You can just jump in anywhere you want now. And Halloween 6 is like, haha, fucking got you, mate. Who's Tommy Doyle? You don't know, dickhead. Where were you in 1978? Get a fucking DVD player and figure it out. We're not doing the work for you. So this is all just the pre-production. We haven't actually talked about the fucking movie yet.
we haven't actually got to the movie. This is us. So now this is where, believe it or not, this is where it starts to go sideways. Because up until now, it's just regular, right? Now, production goes off relatively without a hitch. Cool, fine. However, midway through production, let's not forget this film's budget's only $5 million. Midway through the production, Dimension Films are also producing simultaneously Hellraiser Bloodline, which is Hellraiser Part 4, which is being directed by a guy called Kevin Yeager. Kevin Yeager's directorial debut. Kevin Yeager is most known for, he's the guy that created the Chucky doll. He used to be in special effects. Now he's turned his hand to directing. Exactly right. He ends up going on set to Hellraiser Bloodline and creates this film for them and delivers it the way he wants. But once he delivers the film to the Weinsteins want Pinhead up front instead of the slow burn that he's created, and blah, 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 and want this change and that change and more scares and blah, 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 forcing reshoots. Those reshoots on Hellraiser Bloodline means that the money's got to come from somewhere. Where does it come from? Halloween 6. So Halloween 6 has to give away nearly $1 million of its budget to Hellraiser in order to facilitate the special effects and the costumes and all that kind of nonsense, which now is leaving Halloween 6 almost 1/5 of its budget down.
And that's the Hellraiser that goes to space, isn't it?
Film. Correct. That production ends up such a disaster that Kevin Yeager, that production, Hellraiser, ends up such a disaster. Kevin Yeager ends up fighting to get his name taken off of it, and it becomes a directed by Alan Smithy film, which, for those that might not know, Michelle, do you know what an Alan Smithy film is?
No, of course not.
One film.
If you're very very briefly, if you're a director of a film, in order to get your name credited, you have to be, not really, but if you're a director of a film, it's best if you're involved with the Directors Guild of America, DGA. However, if you're a member of that union, you can, in very certain circumstances, depending on how bad your vision is compromised, get your name removed from a project. But it is very hard to do, right? You really need to fucking prove your case. Kevin Yeager felt the way Dimension Films were treating his film was compromising his vision, and the film that was delivered was not his film. So he went to the DGA and put in an application to get his name removed. When that is successful, the director's name is replaced with a generic pseudonym called Alan Smithy. If you ever see a film directed by Alan Smithy, that person doesn't exist. That's just a made-up name, right? You can't use it anymore for reasons that we'll go into another day, I'm sure. But at the time, Alan Smithy was a pseudonym, and that meant troubled production. And that's why it's so hard to change the name, because it just, before anybody sees a trailer, directed by Alan Smithy, you know you're in deep shit. Kevin Yeager changed his name to Alan Smithy on Hellraiser Bloodline, never directed another film again. So half, $1 million of Halloween's production budget ends up going over to that film, never to be seen again. The Great Magician. So they fight their way through production, right? All the way through. For the most part, it goes relatively well. Gets to test screenings, but just before test screenings, Donald Pleasance dies, right? Dies of a heart attack. Too bad, so sad. Adios, God bless you, wee bum. They get to the test screenings, but during the test screenings, the film is savaged because apparently it's just a bunch of 14-year-old boys who are pissed at it and they don't like it. But based on these fucking 100 yahoos' opinions, the Weinsteins start demanding considerable reshoots. They basically want the whole last act to be changed. The film as it stood, was leaning into the cult stuff. The Weinsteins wanted all of it fucking gone. But they couldn't do it because they couldn't do it the way they wanted to, because now Donald Pleasance wasn't around. Not only that, Dixon, the cinematographer, he wasn't available either. So Dixon ended up getting replaced by a guy called Thomas Calloway. So now Thomas Calloway has to step in and reshoot basically the entire last third of the film. Fine, whatever. But because the original, what is now known as the producer's cut, was leaning into the cult stuff as much as it was, the new stuff by mandate of Dimension Films had to be bloodier, had to be gorier, had to have sexier music in it, had to basically, they changed the whole thing. They added the massacre of the doctors at the end to get the body count up. They added in all these weird hints of genetic experimentation with the babies in the jars and all that kind of stuff. The green syringe liquid thing that smashes Michael, like, and again, much like Halloween 5, nobody had any idea what any of it was. Was the cult responsible for manipulating the medical practices and try to genetically modify another Michael Myers? Don't know. Nobody's got any idea what is going on in this film again, but it's got a really sexy soundtrack. It looks really fucking sexy, and it moves quicker with more kills, so the Weinsteins are happy. At the end of it, the original composer, Howarth, who was back to do this one, he tries to keep up with the changes and changes Carpenter's one and makes it a little bit more synthy and a little bit more rock heavy and all that kind of stuff. But Joe Chappelle, who now, at the same time, because he's doing God's work on Halloween 6 and bringing it in on budget, Weinsteins are saying to him, we need to reshoot some more of Hellraiser Bloodline. You're the guy to do it. So he steps in and starts doing all the reshoots in Hellraiser Bloodline. So now he's juggling two films at the same time. He's backwards and forwards between these two productions. And he ends up bringing in his friend, who isn't Howarth, to do additional scoring, which pisses Howarth off to no end. So then there's troubled tensions between those two. They end up getting through all this nonsense, start releasing trailers and all that kind of stuff. But it's another one of those cases where there's footage and shots and promotional materials that's never released in the film. And because it is so severely maligned, even after the reshoot, once it gets released, that the producer's cut bootleg starts to become a thing. The producer's cut bootleg was the original story that leaned into the cult stuff that was 8 minutes longer and tried to explain all the Thorn stuff a little bit more cohesively before the Weinsteins came in and fucked it all up. The bootleg stuff, you used to be able to go to markets and film fairs and people would have it. Then the Pirate Bay and all that kind of stuff started becoming a thing. And you used to be able to just capture it on bits and bobs on these different platforms or conventions or whatever the case may be. The problem was the producer's cut was always appalling footage. It was dark and it was grainy because it was never polished, it would never be released. But it ended up gaining such ground that eventually Anchor Bay in 2014 got their hands on it, got the rights to it, polished it up, and gave it its first official release on that Michael Myers box set, the Anchor Bay box set. And now all of a sudden, the world can see the producer's cut. And it's better. It's not great, but it's better. How our score is reintroduced. There's a bit more class in it. Like, it's a bit, The grading's changed a little bit, so it's less, fucking abrasive to the eyes. There's more stuff with Danielle Harris's. I keep saying Danielle Harris. There's more stuff with Jamie Lloyd's character that gets fleshed out a little bit more, and then the finale takes place in a cult, round tables and fire and all that kind of nonsense. So that's where it ended up. The film ended up making back $1 million more than Halloween 5 did at the box office. So it was considered a bit of a flop, therefore released all the territories straight to VHS, which is, to come full circle, why we could never get our hands on it, because nobody fucking wanted it. And now we're left with these two versions of the film. Albeit in this podcast, we're talking about the theatrical version, which is a bit of a mess, but still gets some things right, I feel. I think it's more interesting. Production woes notwithstanding, I think the film is still a little bit more interesting than Halloween 5, mostly because characters have things to do. Tommy Doyle has a quest. Let's find out what's the story with this baby. He has a goal to try and achieve, and through that goal, we learn a little bit about him. Even the real estate guy, he's a bit one-dimensional, but that was another one that get his fucking head exploding. That was added in after the fact. That was one of the reshoots. The trucker, the redneck trucker, he gets his head twisted off. That was a reshoot. All those bloody gory parts were up in. That notwithstanding, how do we feel about the final product? I'm curious.
Whoa. I mean, it's a hell of an intro. I think, look, I haven't seen the producer's cut, and I very much want to, so I can't speak on that. But you can tell watching this movie that this is not a movie that was executed cleanly beginning to end. You don't have to know. It's like you could not know a single thing that you just told us about this film, and you can put it on and you can watch it and be like, something happened. Like particularly the end.
Yeah,
this
is a fucking mess.
The theatrical release of this movie, it ends. It just finishes. No, it's all right. I shouldn't say it ends. It just stops. It's just like the movie is going on. Then for unknown reasons, Loomis is like, Michael's apparently dead again. Everyone has escaped. Loomis is standing next to the car, and he's like, I have some things to do. And then he goes back in, and then maybe dies off screen because he was already dead when they shot that, and you see him scream because Michael,
because he was already dead,
taking his mask off. I mean, the ending of this, we can really dive into it in a minute, but you can tell from watching it, particularly in the last act, like there's a lot of fucking back and forth and going on. It's really significant what you said about Howarth being kind of, I don't know, forgotten or overwritten there, because he's the last one. Yeah. He's it. Alan Howarth has done the score to the Halloween films.
He's the last survivor.
Yeah. It's like Halloween was John Carpenter. Every Halloween film from then on was John Carpenter and Howarth for 2 and 3, and then it was just Alan Howarth for 4, for 5, and then he started 6. So he was the only guy. Like Cundy was gone. Donald Pleasance is there, but Donald Pleasance isn't in it much. And for the first time ever, Donald Pleasance and Michael Myers don't have a single scene together. Not once are Loomis and Myers on screen together in Halloween 6. The closest we get is the off-camera scream at the very end. So we really we have to acknowledge that the last guy who was there when this shit was great is there. He's ready to go. And they're just like, I got this other guy. I don't know.
But he's gradually getting fucking nudged out of frame, kind of thing.
Which it's just it's
You've seen the producer's cut, Cable. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely a better film. No, I wouldn't say streets above what we see theatrically, but at least it explains a bit more, and there's a bit more of that. Like I said, that just a bit more exposition that just fills in a few more of the blanks to make it a bit more, understandable. So yeah.
I mean, there's some stuff though that I don't know if the producer's cut could fix this, because this movie, I know they had to change, because of budgets and stuff and reshoots and lost people and got people, but start to finish, whatever scene was a reshoot or an original shoot, this movie looks like it was shot for $12 on a handy cam. Like, God, I miss Dean Cundy. Like, it looks terrible. It looks so cheap and terrible the whole way through. There's not a single scene in this movie I was like, oh, that looks nice.
See, I think some of it looks okay. I think some of it looks all right.
It does that horrible early to mid 90s thing, particularly at the beginning when like Jamie is in the sex dungeon, whatever the hell that is. Like it's this weird, they want it to look dark, but they obviously like shot it a weird way to make it look dark and then put a grading on it to make it darker. So it almost looks like monochromatic in parts, and then it's like really bright for a second, and then they kind of gray it out. The cut, like the lighting in that opening sequence is atrocious. And she's also
pretty harsh, pretty abrasive.
She's really wet and sweaty for no reason. Like she doesn't look sweaty.
Dirty t-shirt and shit.
Like, yeah. But like going from the very beginning, the opening of this movie is awful. The opening sucks. It's worse than 5. It's a horrible way to open It's a horrible way to open any movie. It's a horrible way to open a Halloween movie. The weird like slow-mo static thing that they do as she's giving birth and screaming, and it was an effect they loved in the 90s, I know, but it looks bad. But also, the number one thing that we should be talking about, and the question on everyone's lips, who the baby daddy? Because I did my research and I know who the baby daddy is. It's Michael Myers.
In the producer's cut, it's Michael Myers.
Michael Myers is the father of this baby, which, couple of questions.
Yep.
Does that mean for 6 years, the Man in Black, who we find out the Man in Black is Dr. Wynn, who is from the first movie, different actor, but the character from the first Halloween, it's Dr. Wynn. Only now it's the dad from Dharma and Greg is playing.
Yes.
And that's all I can see him as. Also, that guy, even in the 6 years, like he's too old to be overpowering anyone or shooting up cop stations and blowing up things. Come on now, mate. But anyway, so for 6 years, has he been keeping Michael prisoner as a sex slave, forcing him to constantly, or were they waiting? Were they like, oh, you can't have sex with an 8-year-old, Michael? That would just be vulgar. We'll wait until she's 14 because that'll be fine. Like, what's the logic going on with this crazy cult of doctors and nurses? I got the impression from the fetuses we see at the end that this is not the first time that she's given birth. It's just the first time it lived. So that there's been horrible, horrible things. That, if you start to think about the opening of this movie, it is the most disturbing, upsetting, deeply, profoundly upsetting horror movie ever made. Ever. Because literally a young child, an 8-year-old girl was kidnapped, locked in a dungeon, and then forced to have sex with, in this universe,
with her serial
killer. She was right.
Greatest monster. Like the worst, who is also related to her. I mean, there's levels that just beg a belief of how depraved this movie is, but we're supposed to ignore all of it because he puts on a white mask.
And it's not funny. It's actually horrific.
But it is like, what is funny is how little anyone seemed to think that was going to be a problem. Like when the movie opened and she's giving birth, I'm like, did she age 20 years in 6 years, or is this a child? And Michael is right. Like this is a horrible rape survivor movie. And then the payoff she gets for her 6 years of being imprisoned and had the most unthinkable things done to her is she immediately gets impaled for a cheap kill on a bit of farm machinery. Like that's what you like. It's the darkest timeline. It's the most horrible thing I've ever seen any character suffer through. And bearing in mind, for the 2 previous films, we watched this character be a child. Like as an audience, we have an emotional connection to a child that, while we didn't see her for 6 years, was in hell, in literal hell. Like nothing worse has happened to a character in any horror movie ever than what happens to Jamie Lloyd in between Halloween 5 and 6. And we're meant to not think about it, not acknowledge it, and then she just gets killed. Which is, her death. I realized when I was watching it this time, it is the signature move of the Halloween franchise from the first film through to Halloween Ends. Anytime there is a strong, potentially threatening female character in a Halloween movie, they get killed really like matter-of-factly. Don't care, just get rid of them. Like if you think about it, so in number 1, Laurie isn't powerful at all. In number 2, she doesn't do much, but when she does, she starts to actually stand up to Michael and be a bit of a threat. So she's getting a bit stronger. She's starting to Sarah Connor it. So in between 2 and 4, they kill her off screen because she's just meh. And then they start with a little kid who isn't a threat at all, and her sister. And then the sister actually like outsmarts Michael a bit in 4. Rachel kind of starts to figure him out a bit. So in 5, they just get rid of her in a really pointless kill because whatever. And then in 6, Jamie's now grown up and has escaped and actually has some smarts to, do something about. And then she's just killed on a bit of farm machinery. And then we see Laurie in H2O, and she's smart and she overpowers Michael. She cuts off his fucking head, and then she doesn't. And then in Resurrection, we'll just fucking kill her. And then in Halloween Kills, we got Laurie's daughter is actually starting to become like a threat, and she just gets killed for no reason. And then Halloween Ends, Allison is like, fuck this. I'm just going to be meek and mild. I'm not going to be strong. I'm not going to fight. I'm just going to sit here and cry. And she fucking lives. So it turns out the Halloween movies that started this whole like genre of the final girl fucking hates the final girl and will just kill her for no reason in the next movie. And that's what we get in this. This is the ultimate version of
Never
that.
thought about it, but you're absolutely right.
Like this
but even
character,
the Jamie kill is like so brutal in a way. Like you said, she gets put on the farm machinery, so she's already impaled by, it looks like, what is it, 3 blades, and then she sort of says, you're not going to get him, and then he pushes her further on, and then he turns it on.
He like the grind against the bones and the
like,
moan of she's in agony. It's not a quick death.
But she's already cactus, and then it's like, I'll just turn it on just to... Anyway.
And that was one of the things that I felt like this film did right, is it gave Michael Myers his balls back. Like, Michael Myers is a savage motherfucker in this film. Like, probably since part 2, this is as tough and unrelenting as he's been, probably until Tyler Mane takes over in Halloween, Rob Zombie, Halloween 2008. Michael Myers, I thought, and the mask I thought was great in this one as well. It feels like they got the mask right.
It's cool, yeah.
Thankfully, again.
I mean, they just seem to pay attention to it. It's more than they did for the last few. They're like, oh, that's kind of an important part of the character.
It's kind of funny because I said it in the last podcast. I said in the last one that I really love the mask, but I was confusing my movies because I just watched 6. So no, 6 is actually a really, really good mask. Like, if I could get another one, I would
really
get
good
6.
mask.
Yep.
How did you find 100%. It, Michelle? Like, you've literally just like watched little Jamie grow up, and you've sat through 4 and 5 and seen this and 6, like, all right, like, let's see where this goes. How did you find the handling of the one surviving character that's not Dr. Loomis?
Well, I think I was a bit confused because I messaged you all being like, do they just not know how to name other characters, or is she meant to be Jamie Lloyd? Like, because it's not the same actress and they don't really go into it, you sort of think, who the hell is this? And if they just renamed her Jamie. So it was a bit confusing at the beginning.
Yeah. Did you have any emotional response when she died? Were you like, what the fuck? Were you like, oh, I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't care.
Oh, I don't think I had much emotional response to this movie at all, to be honest. I was just glad when it was over.
Wow. Fair enough.
So that being said, where does everybody lie with it? Where does it sit in the echelon, do you think?
I'm looking through my notes. I'm
going to jump in quickly and just sort of say, I don't hate some of the Druid kind of stuff and the mythology behind that. But the problem I have with it is that was never something that was set up with the character originally. And then I just think, we've talked about it in a few podcasts, Angus, that, the brilliance of the Michael Myers character is that we don't know enough about him. He doesn't speak. He killed his sister when he was 6 years old, and he's been in an asylum. There's something about not understanding him and not knowing his motivations, just that he's pure evil, makes him work. So now to sort of explain him too much and then, kind of giving him this new sort of backstory almost, it kind of undermines all the stuff that's come before it, really.
Well, it really is like, it feels like, and maybe the producer cuts fix this, but this version feels like it's middle of the road. Like, they introduce a lot of big ideas and they don't do enough with them to earn having these big ideas. Like you said in the producer's cut, it ends with a big cult ritual, which is kind of a payoff for this being a movie about druid cults. But in this one, it doesn't. This one, it ends same old, same old. You know, the hero, this time it's a boy instead of a girl, but you know, the final character finds a way to get one up on Michael at the last minute and take him down. And then, you know, the people who live run away happily ever after until the next movie. So there is no reason for literally anything that Tommy Doyle talks about with, hey, I figured out the Mark of Thorn is the constellation, all this great, interesting stuff. There's no payoff to that because the end result is, if you just stab him with some kind of chemical and hit him with a fucking pipe, like, he'll go down. So what does it matter if druids are involved or not? Like, who cares?
He's doing it the Scottish way.
Yeah, like
that's how we resolve issues in Glasgow. We just inject you with some green shit and then beat you with a pipe.
I'd love to see one of the horror franchises just like the whole way through. It's just these Midwest American kids dealing with this horrible killer. And then like in part 5, this Scottish guy's on holiday and like, I know Jason Voorhees kicks in a door and the Scottish guy's like, fuck, and just like glasses him and then grabs a chair leg and just wails on him and he's dead in like 2 minutes. And everyone's like, do you know who just killed? He's like, some fuck who spilled my beer. That's how I killed. I don't give a fuck. He just like sits back down and keeps drinking. And that's the end of the movie. He's like, oh, you just need to go overseas. This problem would be solved.
You just needed to meet a drunk Glaswegian.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if this film.
So where does it land with you, Gus?
I thought going into this current like cycle rewatch, I had solidly in my head like 5 is the absolute low point of this franchise. But I watched 5 and 6 back to back this time, and 5 at least makes sense. Like the Man in Black is a weird thing, but it doesn't derail anything in the story. It's just a weird thing that doesn't get much of a payoff. Like he's just kind of there. And it's like, who's that guy? Whatever. Like the actual beginning, middle, and end kind of go their way. And then he kind of does something in the end because he breaks Michael out of jail. You're like, all right, I don't know who he is, but he did something and he was there and he did something and now that's the end. Okay. But this one, like, it doesn't make any fucking sense. The way that the theatrical goes out, this movie doesn't really hold together with a beginning, middle, and end. I've seen the movie before. I know what happens in the movie. I was still watching it like, wait, fucking what? What are we doing? Why is this happening? Why are they going there? Like the magical mysticism of Dr. Loomis is in overdrive in this one, of him just showing up. Michael doing like they say flat out that the kid's house is like a half a mile from the festival. Yeah. And Michael has 3 kills in a row, one at the house, one at the festival, one back at the house, and they all seem to happen within like 2 minutes of each other, which means he's killing someone and then fucking sprinting half a mile to the fairground to kill the DJ and then turn around and fucking sprinting back. Like the people who go to the house from the fair drive there in a car and he's there when they get there. Like it really, and he also has time to tie the guy up and put him in a tree.
Yeah.
Like their timelines.
That was something I
distracting.
What if the house is here and the fairground is here, but the road to get to them goes around in like a big loop run like this?
I mean, sure.
To be fair, this is the kind of story leaps that you take with Star Wars. So I'm going to take it with Halloween.
But give me a scene like he jumps in the car and the guy's like, "Is that your house there?" He's like, "Yeah, but you have to go around the long way because you can't drive through the farm. There's a dam in the middle."
It's a one-way street.
He's like, "It's a 2-minute walk, but it's a."
That also begs the question: is like, why the fuck? Yeah, why the fuck would they be driving? Let's just climb the fence. We'll be there in a minute.
Every now and then, and I think it had to do with the work location because it was all old and dusty and shit all the time. So every 6 months, I was getting pretty bad, and they actually were looking. They go, maybe your tonsils, we could get rid of them. I'm like, do you do that? They go, not much, not really.
So I think that it struggles to hold itself together ultimately, and I know that's a lot of meddling, but I really this time around I think it might be a harder watch than 5 for me. Like 5 is rough, but there are parts of it that are so ridiculous that if you're in the mood, like I said in the last episode, you can kind of be like, all right, this is just stupid, but at least I can have a laugh at it. There's not even really anything in this that you can have a laugh at. Like it takes itself incredibly seriously and doesn't really pay off that sincerity. I quite like the way that Paul Stephen Rudd plays Tommy Doyle as like that kind of paranoid crazy person. I think it's a much better interpretation of a traumatized Tommy Doyle than what we got in Halloween Kills. This idea that this guy would just be like obsessively hiding from the world and also trying to find a way to solve the question of what the fuck. Yeah, like that really, he's the first character also that we get to see have that opportunity, you know, because he's been out of the game for 5 movies. Every other character who tries to figure Michael out is either killed or goes crazy, like Loomis. Like no one really and Loomis isn't interested in figuring him out. He tells us that in number 1. You know, I tried to reach him, then I tried to keep him locked away. Like he doesn't want to figure this out. Whereas Tommy's like, he's been out there, like, what's going on? So that's cool. A really, really cool thing. But it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't pay off. And then also the old lady he lives with, who I thought was his mum, who's not his mum, also turns out to be a part of the Cult of Thorn, which is cool. Like it's cool, the idea that everyone's kind of in on it. But then again, they don't go big enough. Like if you're going to show me that, show me a scene where they're like running down the street trying to get help, and every single person in Haddonfield that they come across like kind of holds up their arm and has the mark of Thorn, and they realize that, because the thing is, like, Michael keeps coming back to Haddonfield and that's never really talked about. Like, the fuck is he doing? Why does he keep coming back to this town? Like, what is it because he doesn't know any other towns?
Everybody else is going to New York, man.
Yeah. But if the idea is that the reason he's drawn back there is because he's a part of this cult, and Haddonfield is the cult, like everyone in this fucking town is a part of the cult, that's truly terrifying when you realize, like, Michael isn't your only problem. Like, everyone here is out to get you, except for the police force, because they keep dying every year. That's why they aren't a part of the Cult of Thorn, because they keep shipping in new people from out of town because the cops keep dying. It's like, just bring new guys in from the next town over.
The cops have got a higher turnover in Haddonfield than fucking McDonald's. Like, they just churn through their staff in that fucking joint. It's
2
wild.
movies in a row, they lose every single cop. Like, that's crazy.
Every cop.
Except for, like, Ben Meeker, that's it.
Nobody takes a step back.
So yeah, I don't know.
Michelle?
Together.
I remember, like, going back when we first started this, and Shaun, you said, "Oh, they get a bit shit," and I've been like waiting, and finally it has happened.
So this is the first one that you're saying this is shit?
Yeah.
Wow. Is there any, like, this, look, we were talking about this in the group chat. You don't even like Paul Rudd. You're not one of
I like Paul Rudd. I just don't find him as attractive as you do.
I think he's charming and delightful. That's what I like about Paul Rudd.
That's not what you said.
He has a face you want to watch. He's the original Glenn
I think
Powell.
he's very one-dimensional.
This is just...
He just plays the same guy in every film.
What are you
Like, he's getting zero range.
I think he's a good actor, but you made it out to sound like he was like the eye candy in this movie. He's not. I
mean, there's no one else in this movie. What are you going to look at? The baby?
Well,
the 4-year-old kid?
What's his name?
Tim or the brother, whatever his name is.
Weirdly thin Dana.
Yeah, she's...
Dana's so weirdly thin.
Also, that's another weird thing. Sick. Like, the house is sold by Strode Realty, which was Laurie Strode's dad. So is he still alive?
Yeah.
And if so, why didn't he take his granddaughter in when his daughter...
Know.
Like, this film really... It does so well at the beginning to try and be like, we're gonna go through this and we're gonna explain some crazy stuff.
We're gonna look
Man in Black.
You.
We're gonna tell you, and then they kind of spiral, and that whole family drama thing with the dad being an absolute prick and the mum being this meek little thing, and he kicked it. Like, that whole backstory about Dana getting pregnant and leaving.
Dana or Cara?
Yeah, who the hell is Dana?
Cara. Sorry, Cara.
Cara. Yeah.
The whole thing of her, like, we don't learn in the movie that she got kicked out of home for getting pregnant. You have to read that in, like, Wikipedia articles to figure that out. You just know that her dad doesn't like her, or her bastard child, as he calls it.
And it was hard to tell if that was the dad or like the stepdad, because he was just such an asshole. So when he got blown up, I was like, thank God.
Yeah, and then the brother who's there to do nothing other than just, like, get killed while he's rooting. Like, they make so many mistakes that they seem to be working. I think they're working so hard to, like, fix other problems, they forget to address their own. It's like, we got so much work to do to fix what happened in part 5. And it's like, yeah, but what about what you're doing in this movie? And they're like, it'll work itself out. It's all right.
Yeah.
Tarantino had an idea, so I think we're going to be fine.
Focus.
And of course, the fact that this is Donald Pleasance's last outing is a real shame because his character gets to. This is not the send off Loomis should have had.
Always that kind of weird, unceremonious end to all these guys. Raul Julia's final film was fucking Street Fighter, for Christ's sake. Like,
hey, but at least he got to finish the movie. Like, Donald Pleasance didn't even, like you said, like they went back to do reshoots and rework this movie, and he was already dead. So the way the movie ends now is this awkward scene of him outside that obviously was shot to be put in somewhere differently. And he was meant to go back and have his final stand with Michael. And you just don't see that. You just hear his character scream. And so this beloved icon of this series.
Okay, I'm going to go home now.
Yeah. He just gets like the worst death of any character in this movie, which is a real bummer.
I thought this one was like the most convoluted of all of them, finally. There's just a lot that you're like, is that Jamie Lloyd? Is that Kara's father? Like, Tommy Doyle, like you said, if you haven't seen the other movies, you would have no idea who these people are. It's like this is the first one that I was like kind of bored watching, besides maybe like Halloween 2. But yeah, this was probably one of my like least favorite ones, I think.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be working to not be a slasher, doesn't it?
And like you don't care about the characters, like they're just kills. Like it had good kills, but you like, oh god, that guy's an asshole. That guy's not doing anything. Like who cares when he blows up, or that guy's in the tree.
Some of the kills are cool, like the head twists, the blowing up the dad. They're pretty cool.
It's
even
raining
the
red.
DJ in the light is a bit of fun.
Yeah. Why is the rain wet? What did she say? Warm.
See, that's so weird.
That's so stupid. Look, it's raining. It's raining. It's raining red.
And it's warm.
Fucking idiot, kid. Look up.
Oh yeah.
Who gets wet with red shit and doesn't look up to see what it is? She's just gonna stand there and like, yeah. Stupid fucking kid.
And the whole like Danny, was that his name? Danny story? Like, what is that? He's just like staring off into space. That didn't make any sense.
Well, again, it's the same fucking problem that they had in 5, where they just introduced this little blonde kid and then don't know what to do with him, but he's just there.
But I feel like that was like a storyline they didn't see through, or they didn't know what to do with. But it was kind of like he was almost like Michael Myers incarnate, kind of a bit. Like it was kind of like there was that sinking of the minds a little bit, or I don't know. I don't know what they were trying to do there.
That's where the original script. Yeah, that's what the original script was aiming for. Is that he was going to be the next incarnation.
Yeah,
through the Strode bloodline.
Which renders like the whole need for the baby.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I feel like they try to cram too many ideas into one thing.
But that doesn't make sense because by this point in the timeline, we've learned Laurie is adopted. So the Strodes aren't blood relatives of her, which means that Kara isn't a blood relative of her, which means Kara's kid isn't a blood relative. So he has fucking nothing to do with Michael Myers. Like if this whole thing is meant to be about bloodlines, Jamie's baby does.
No, so I took it as, I understood all that, but I took it as maybe this kid's already been tapped on the shoulder by the cult, and he's the kid for that family that's infected to kill them. You know what I mean? Like that whole story that.
Is that because he lives in the Myers house? Is that?
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe that think is the house is evil.
And also, he stabs the father, and no one says anything. They're just like, "Oh, it's fine." Like,
he doesn't stab him. He pulls a
knife on him. He doesn't stab him.
I thought he'd stabbed him.
No, he pulls a knife on him, and everyone's like, "Whoa!" But that's pretty cool.
It would have been better if he'd stabbed him.
That's like if we had a bit more of that from that kid, I would have liked him more. It's like, "Oh, you call me a bastard and you slap my mum. What about now, fat man?" It's like. And the look on the kid's face is pretty good. Like that's the one moment in the film that I'll watch that again because the look on his face is very much like fucking try me, and I'm scared of the kid in that. Like, he's seen some shit.
He reminded me that dad reminded me of Biff from 1985 in Back to the Future a bit, just a complete arsehole.
Yeah, true.
Bully. Yeah.
He also reminds me of Ronnie in Halloween Ends because he's just like this fat guy who hates his life and he sits at work and drinks. That's it. He's just sitting in he gets off the phone with his wife, and as soon as he hangs up, he's like, and he's got a bottle right there and just starts necking fucking
and then I'm gonna watch Hard Target. I don't want to go home.
And when I do go home, the best. I'm gonna yell at her about something.
Where's my copy of Uncle Buck? Fuck you. Fight me for 2 days.
There's only 2 of us that can comment on this podcast. and I know movies are always a little bit contrived and convenient when sounds are made by certain things and quiet at other times. But I tell you what, that baby not making a sound in that fucking cabinet at the bus station for a long time until conveniently Tommy Doyle gets there is way over the top. That's not happening. And then later on, when they're running around with the baby, we're not really hearing the baby. And then when he does the sneak up attack, I've got the baby, and no noise. And then the distraction is obviously then it makes it off camera, and then you think, oh, now they've been undone here. But I was just like, come on, surely not. I don't know. I just thought, unfortunately, that's not.
Do
how
they explain?
babies...
They do explain a bit more in the producer's cut how Tommy finds the baby and the baby doesn't make noise, don't they? I thought I read that was something like makes a bit more sense in the producer's cut. It's less like, what the fuck?
Oh, I thought he just followed the blood trail and that's how he found it.
Well, even that's, I don't know about you, but I found that a little bit contrived because what is the timeline? Because I feel like if Tommy heard...
It's the next morning.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if Tommy heard he obviously heard the radio station at the time he recorded it, but then he's re-listening, he's hearing the background, he's picking up, whatever the bus is, and he's, I know where she was. He goes there the next day. If that was more closer to the night, he's heard the recording, he's just playing it, and he goes, I find that more believable. But the fact is, he goes the next morning. I'm sorry, I don't know about every bus stop, but I'm pretty sure when cleaners come through or whatever, someone's going to go, is that fucking blood on the floor? Like, I feel like that is something that would get, hang on. Oh, but then they probably go, what? Don't even call the police because they're fucking useless. But I feel like that's something that it was quite obvious. I know it's to be obvious for him, but also as an audience, us see it and he follows it. But I just felt like that was way too overdone. I'm sorry. A blood spill like that and a trail, somebody's seeing that and going, there's blood all over the carpet.
Mm-hmm.
I guess also like it's Haddonfield, and so someone sees a lot of blood and they're like, ugh, this again. They just move a few seats down.
Yeah.
The baby thing is a big problem.
It's fucking Friday again.
That's a newborn baby. Like that baby is less than a day old when it gets chucked in a cupboard.
Yeah, do babies survive if you chuck them in a cupboard?
I don't know how much food that baby would have had. Like she certainly didn't have a chance to do any breastfeeding when she was on the road running from Michael that night. And if anyone has,
it's in the producer's cut. Anyway,
if you don't, that's just a 20-minute extended sequence of her just like
breast pump.
Yeah, if you don't feed a baby like the immediate moment it wants to be fed, the sound that comes out of it like cuts through your very soul. It is just horrific, and you can hear it for miles. So that is the biggest lead.
Harrowing.
Like, yeah, this newborn will just get put in the cupboard and not make horrible sounds. Also, did no one else piss that day? Like no one else went down to the toilet.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It just felt like that's again. I would be happy to believe it if he literally clicked onto it and go, "Hang on, did I hear that right?" And you see him spool the tapes back and listens, and then he goes straight there, and because it was pretty vacant when she was there.
Also,
I could believe that, but not the next morning when there's a clerk that's working there. Like you said, people coming through, going for a piss, that's just not remotely possible.
Yeah, it's pretty...
recording on those fucking machines as well. 1995, not 1968. Like, fucking cassettes, bro. Like, why? No need for that.
Because he's kooky. He's a kooky boy. It's I will give Michael this though. Like he achieves his goals. Like in every movie, he sets out to fucking murder his family, and like he does it. Like he gets them. He gets
one or two at a time.
Yeah, he didn't.
And he does the washing.
Like well, that come on. Because if that means he killed her outside, he got blood on the sheets. He took the sheets, carried her up to the attic, and then he took the sheets down to the attic. But when this happened, I laughed. I was like, "Oh my god, it's ridiculous!" And then I thought about it a bit. I was like, "That's actually the scariest part of the movie, because that means like he's just so insane that his brain works on a track where he's like, murder this woman, take that, put her there, put the sheets in the machine." Like that's really Imagine if you saw that in real life. Like, imagine if you rocked up to a crime scene in real life and you found a brutally murdered person in the attic of a house, and then you went all the way downstairs and someone was washing the blood-covered sheets. You'd be like, oh, whoever did this is the most insane psychopath ever. Like, they didn't just murder them and throw them in a cupboard and walk off. They took time out of their day
to do laundry,
to go to opposite ends of the house. It's not even like she's in the washing machine. Like, that's the craziest Michael's been in any of the movies. That's the craziest thing he's done in the literal sense of the term.
I was expecting her to be in the washing machine when the father opened it up.
That would make sense. But no, he's just washing because he's so fucking crazy. He's like, and now I'm going to wash the sheets. You don't know what I'm going to do.
I was going to say that was
dishes.
You don't know where I'm going. You don't know where I'm going.
No, I agree.
Like, remember in Halloween 5 when he just does donuts in a car for a while? And you're like, what's he doing? Like, there's times where he's just like, he's so detached from reality. He's so detached from reality. You forget that he's just an escaped mental patient. Like, he really, at the end of the day, he's just a real, like, fuck druids. Fuck all this. He's just a really crazy dude. Just so unhinged.
When you think about it, though, like
Sean's just gone. He's just gone. It's like Steve Buscemi when Steve Buscemi in Con Air, when he's like, oh yeah, this young girl, I had a tea party with her, and then I drove through 3 states wearing her head as a hat, and it's like, oh, yours is so crazy. No, what's even crazier is Michael Myers fucking putting the sheets in the washing machine. That is the craziest thing.
That sequence playing out in my head has just made my fucking week. It's just like
it's true. I'm
gonna cut off her head. I'm gonna wash it. I'm gonna take it downstairs. I'm gonna do the washing. You can imagine.
Like, imagine if you were watching him do that through the window. You watch him carry the body upstairs. Like, oh my god, he's killed that woman. And then you watch him come back downstairs with the sheets. Like, what is he doing? And then he puts it in the machine. You would be petrified, not of the dead body. If they're washing the sheets, you'd be like, is he fucking washing the sheets? He didn't just put them in. Like, he put them in close. He turned it on. Like, he did the run. It's and he did it with care because the machine isn't smeared with blood on the outside. Like,
I agree. It's so weird because
oh my god,
I'm glad you brought it up, and it was good to see Shaun laugh so much. But I was actually thinking the same thing. Like, I know there's certain things that clearly Michael must do off screen to give us the surprise or the wins the surprise. It's so true.
Are you okay?
Still going. He's never going to be able to do his own laundry. Every time he goes to wash the bed sheets.
Yeah, but it's true. I was thinking it was like such a good scene when you see her. You don't actually see her get the axe, but you see the blood splatter on the sheet. And then when Kara comes around the back, the sheet's clearly clean or gone. And you go, well, he's actually gone to the effort of taking it down. Yeah. And it's like, that's crazy. Like, how often does Michael do that in the films? Like, if he kills someone, he might move the body slightly out of the way, but he doesn't concoct, like, again, do this whole regime.
Also, like, the only other time we see him do anything kind of close to this is in the first one when he kills Bob and then he puts the sheet over his head with the glasses.
Yes.
But even that is like to try and kind of lure the girlfriend into a false sense of security. He doesn't, like, no one is watching. He doesn't do it for anyone. He's not doing it to trick. He's not doing it for anyone to see. He's not doing it to trick anyone. He's not doing it to try and cover up the fact. Like, he's literally just doing the washing. He's so insane. He's so insane. He just does the washing. Like, it's not. It's just for him. It's just for him. It's just for Michael.
I'm gonna die.
But actually, I'll add another layer to it. He went to the trouble. The power is out in that house, yet he made the washing machine still work. He was still right.
He rewired it. He really
he just got an extension cord to the next property to make sure the gag would work.
But it's just the thing. It's not even a gag. It's not for anyone to find. It's not like he's Kevin McAllister, like, laying traps. He literally just does it for him.
Yeah.
It's just a Michael moment.
That's fucking.
How many deleted scenes could we have from so many movies where Michael just does something fucking like he just cuts someone's head off and then just like sits for a minute and just eats an ice cream.
And then just does
does donuts in the car.
Does donuts in a fucking car park for nobody else's benefit.
I want to see a scene where he just like
his own fun.
I want to see him like walking through he's walking through a field to murder someone and he sees some rubbish and he picks the rubbish up and puts it in the bin because he's like, no. It's like a little moment of Michael just like, no, pick up after yourself. And no one's watching. No one knows he's doing it. He's just like,
so it's weird when he cries, but it's not weird when he does laundry? Like his little human side comes out?
Him crying is showing some sort of humanity in there in a character that should not have any humanity.
The washing is not?
No, because that, like I said, it's such an insane it's the most insane thing he does. Like killing people.
Never doing washing again.
Like he killed someone because he's killer. Like he's got blood. But like doing that, putting the sheets in the machine up, it's like he is not on this planet. He's got nothing to do with reality.
He is not well.
He's so devoid of any kind of human emotion he'll be like, all right, that's dirty.
Right. Fuck off, Angus. We gotta wrap this up.
We've all got laundry to do. So
I do. I've got to fold.
We got to fold.
All right.
All right. Stars. How many stars? What do we got, Michelle? What do you give it out of 5?
I give it 2.
Yeah, I give it
2 for Shaun.
2.
Cable.
I might as well just keep going with the 2s. Yeah, I think I still enjoy 5 a little bit more. I think this one has. I think this one's got.
I'm sorry, Cable. Start again. I'm sorry, Cable. I'm genuine.
Are you picturing
really
Michael Myers folding my washing or what?
I'm sorry.
You know that's my next cosplay video, yeah?
Domestic Michael Myers.
Yeah,
I'm not the only one that cries on this one.
I kind of like some of the elements they went with, like they tried, but again, it's a bit like 5, a bit convoluted, a bit either too many cooks or they didn't have one cook to steer or a captain to steer the ship, and there's not a great cohesion. The fact that they have to have a producer's cut now that people prefer says a lot. But yeah, I kind of and maybe it's because I was watching with Michelle. I'm not too sure, but I did enjoy rewatching 5 recently. But when I put this version on the theatrical cut, I was like, there's a bit of a struggle.
I mean, I give it 1.5. I would give it. I would almost give it 1, but I think that's too low. But I do think I can't rate it above 5 after this current rewatch, because, like I said, at least 5 like runs start to finish, and it has elements of, familiarity. This one is it's convoluted and weird. It definitely, like, the performances are pretty good. They're not great. They've definitely been better. The insanity of what happens at the start is just it's not a fun kind of horror. It's just upsetting. And the ending is just unforgivable. It's one of the worst endings to a movie. The theatrical cut, like it jumps around and then it just finishes, and Loomis dies. And Michael takes his mask off for no apparent reason to go and kill Loomis, or maybe he takes his mask off because he's done. Maybe
he's gonna wash it.
I got tricked by a baby, so I'm done being Michael. I'm gonna wash this mask and go home and go to bed.
Sean's trying to control himself.
So this movie gets like a 0.5 star and then an additional 1 star just for the washing machine, and that's it. That's where I'm at.
And Paul Rudd.
And that's 6, and we're not done. We've still got films to go, but we are entering an interesting point in the Halloween franchise, because when we come back to Michael Myers again, we are delving into the first of many attempts to kind of change the timeline a little bit. We're retconning, we're ignoring. I don't know what we're doing. We'll get into it when we talk H2O. But when we come back, we're going to be looking at all of the different ways that the franchise tries to course correct. What we will not be doing is laundry. Cue the swing by Everclear.
Never said I was innocent. I won't